So let's talk today about giving feedback. One of the things that we know about modern organisations is that most managers in fact don't give feedback unless it's negative. So today what I'd like to do is to talk to you about 5 really great tips to make feedback really effective and powerful with your people. So tip number 1 is to give feedback that's timely. Timely feedback means that we give feedback pretty much straight after the event or as soon as possible. If we leave it for a week, say, as you know, most people get pretty busy and a week is a long time. So we tend to forget the event. So tip 2 is that feedback needs to be both formal and informal. Informal feedback means that as a manager, I'm giving feedback to my staff on a regular, even on a daily basis. Some people call it corridor feedback, or with one of our clients recently, they preferred to use the expression sit on the desk coaching or sit on the desk feedback. Informal, relaxed, but usually to the point and very timely as well. The other sort of feedback, of course, is more formal feedback, and then it's tied to our performance review, which may be either every 6 months or once a year. So our third great tip about giving feedback is make sure that the feedback is based on your first-hand observation of the event. So what happens if we use third-party feedback or feedback from another person is that you're actually relying on their testimony, so to speak. It kind of becomes like Chinese whispers, where really to what extent is the information you've been given as accurate as you might like it to be. So here's our 4th tip about giving great feedback. This is about giving positive feedback, and interestingly, what research has found is that managers often have the best intention and think that they're giving positive feedback, whereas in fact they're not. What they're doing is they're giving praise and acknowledgement to staff, but they're not actually explaining exactly what it is that they want to reinforce or what behaviours they want to reinforce. So for example, I may have just given a presentation. My manager might say to me, "Great work, that was a great presentation." But unless he tells me specifically what it is that I've done well, then I can't work on that. I can't reinforce that behaviour. So I'm going to give you a step-by-step way of giving positive feedback. So when you're giving positive feedback for your staff, you might like to use our 3-part model: when you, I feel, because. So when you stayed back the other night to help us to complete the photocopying when we were really pressed for time, I felt really pleased about that. We were able to get the materials out to our client first thing the next morning, which was a real plus for us. So well done, you made us look good, and we've made a great impression on our client. Thanks for your great work. Our 5th tip for giving great feedback then is, well, how do you give corrective feedback? And by corrective feedback, I mean negative constructive feedback. So corrective feedback needs to help your staff member understand where they've digressed, where they're not meeting your expectations, where they're not meeting your goals, even in terms of behaviour. So I'm going to use our step-by-step model, just as I did with the positive feedback, to help you now to understand a way of giving corrective feedback. For example, when you were late the other day to that important client meeting, I felt very concerned because we're trying to look professional, and by being late, I think you really undermined our professionalism in the eyes of the client. In the future, what I would prefer, and really what I would expect, is for you to be on time every time, particularly at such an important client meeting. So interesting, there's been a lot of research around the ways in which managers can interact with their staff members in the most positive way. In his book Authentic Happiness, Dr. Martin Seligman, who is the father of positive psychology, actually says that even though corrective feedback can be positive, managers still really need to focus on giving positive feedback every single day to their staff. In fact, the ratio that he suggests is 6:1. That is 6 positive feedback occasions to 1 corrective feedback. So let's sum up those 5 great tips for giving feedback. Number 1 is to make it timely. Don't leave it too long before you give your staff member the feedback that they need to hear. Number 2, make it informal. Sit on the desk, corridor conversations, so that you can always be in the way of giving feedback, making it just part of your day-to-day habit. Our third tip is make sure that the feedback that you're giving is observed firsthand, that you actually observe the behaviours rather than relying on someone else's feedback. Tip number 4 is give positive feedback and use our 3-part model. When you, I felt, because, and make sure you put a thank you on the end. And lastly, giving corrective feedback. Make sure that again you use our 4-part model in this case. When you, I felt, because, and what I would prefer in the future.